Welcome to this episode of Smiling Again. And I'm really pleased today to have with me Klaus White, who is the founder of The Way of the Tortoise. Now, before I get you to tell us your story, Klaus, I'm just going to give everyone a little bit of background about you.
Okay.
Um, I discovered you through The Way of the Tortoise, which is an organization that you set up back in 2018.
That's right.
And you are a single dad of a lovely young girl.
Yeah.
And you are a writer,
hmm
a musician. Look on the back wall there. You can see the evidence is there. And you sing as well.
I do.
And it's probably a few more things that we'll learn along the way. But thank you so much for being with me here today. And we're going to be talking about journaling, which is something that's really, really special to me.
Mhm.
Because years ago, when it felt like my life was starting to fall apart, I started to journal, um, just freehand journaling, sharing my feelings. And that was as a way for me to sort of um, touch base with myself and understand what was happening within me.
Mhm.
And that carried on for years. So I've been journaling now for 13 years, I think it is. And it's something that has been a big part of my healing journey. And when I discovered your journal, I discovered a new type of journal. And that's what I want to talk about today is just this whole topic of journaling, the benefits and the different types of journaling. So thank you for being here, Klaus. And could you start by sharing your story with everybody?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. So as you said, I'm a single dad. I had some major life changes in 2018 and ended up being a single dad. And because of that, and my daughter was four at the time. Time flies. And she's 7 now. But everything had to change. So my career had to change. What I was doing for a living had to change. Everything really. And at the same time as trying to keep everything going and keep everything together, sort of emotionally for her, I had to be there physically for the school run. So I had no choice. Everything had to shift. And I think even now, I mean, it's not that long ago, but it does feel like it was all it does feel like I can see the positives now, and it feels like it's worthwhile. So at that time, really at my lowest point, I've always been interested in personal development, and I've journaled to a certain extent. I did meditation. I started meditating in about 2013, something like that. And I've always been interested in looking after my diet and exercise and all these kind of that's always been really key to me. But I was really put to the test, I think, in 2018. And so even having a whole bookshelf full of personal development books, you know, that's one thing, but actually having to apply them on a daily basis when the last thing you want to do is to do something for yourself. You really just want to curl up, and shut yourself off from the world. But what I discovered, and I was very lucky to have some close friends at the time, and they sort of said, in fact, one friend of mine specifically said, look, you know the theory, just can you just try something, just get one of the books off your shelf. So that sort of started it off, and then I started to write something down, and which to me wasn't necessarily journaling at the time, but I just wanted to write something down. I just felt like I need to get it off my chest, and it was stuff that I didn't necessarily want to share with my close friends. Not that it was anything particularly personal, but it was one thing. If I wanted to I have this need to try and do everything myself. I think maybe that's a human trait. Maybe that's just a male trait. I don't know. I felt like I needed to just work things through myself. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. I think we all have to do that. We have to find our own way forward, which is why journaling is so important. So I started off taking small steps, and they were really the only way that I could find the energy and the enthusiasm to really do anything, just do tiny, tiny bite-sized chunks. So it was one press up, it was one piece of journaling. It was when I was able to do it, it was just a minute or two of meditating, um, a walk around the block instead of sort of instead of a 5K run or something like that, you know. So those small steps were key. So I started to sort of create and populate my day with things that gave me a lift and supported me. And so they became habits. Slowly and surely they became habits, and I increased the number of press-ups, and I increased the, you know, the number of things that I was interested in doing. And I looked into the whole sort of cold shower thing in the morning, you know, the whole Wim Hof method, which is really interesting and still terrifying. But I tried to sort of incorporate these things, tiny things that I can incorporate into my day just to support me and make me feel better. And it worked, and it really did slowly and surely started to lift my mood and make me feel better about myself. And then it sort of morphed into the journal, which thankfully you got, and has helped you. So yeah, so I was encouraged by my close friends to sort of put that structure, because they could see a change in me quite quickly. And a lot of people were sort of astounded, and they wondered if I'd gone to therapy, if I'd gone, you know, what I'd done to sort of get quite quickly to that point, and to be quite practical about what happened and how everything had shifted. And, you know, a lot had to change that year. And it really was having that structure in my day. But also having a young child, I didn't have that much time. So what I created was a structure for myself, which then became the journal. And like I said, my friends sort of encouraged me to sort of get it out there. So I self-published, and I was working with a close friend of mine, and he sort of helped me. Still a very small business, but we've got the journal out there to a lot of people. And I think it's something like over 18,000 people now have got a copy or a couple of copies of the book. And it's incredible the feedback which I have just on a weekly basis, emails or messages, just saying how much it's helped them, and how much that sort of daily structure and focus on positive habits. But more importantly, and I think the key, is the small steps, taking those small steps, because I think making a huge change is great when you've got willpower. It's great when you have an inspired moment, but pretty much always stops after a certain period of time. And so if you can focus on those tiny small steps, then that gives you motivation, makes you feel good about yourself, makes you feel like you've achieved something, then you can take the next step and the next. And so that's what worked for me. It seems to be working for other people. And so that's my story. Oh, and I should mention, it's something, so the reason it's called The Way of the Tortoise is because I noticed I was always reminded of the tortoise and the hare story, which I used to tell my daughter. And I just thought, you know what? I realize I'm a tortoise. I realize that's who I am. And actually the small steps suit me. And I think they suit most people. And so the idea is, you don't focus on the fact that there's someone else in the race with you. There isn't really a race. You're just focusing on your small steps, and you get to where you need to go to.
You've said so many things in there that I'd like to go
Yeah,
back
sorry. I have
and
sometimes have to be
unpack.
reined in. Sorry. You need to, at one point, just go, okay, let's just look at that one thing. Yeah.
Slow down, you're being a tortoise.
I don't really speak like a tortoise, but that's my personality. Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that you said at the very beginning was how you were feeling when
Mm,
life suddenly changed for you.
yeah,
And that feeling of, you know, you just want to curl up into a ball and not have to face things. I mean, those are my words, not facing things, because I think that's definitely what I did for a while, because you just get zapped of all energy.
yeah,
And I think that, you know, the whole idea of one step at a time really, really resonates with me, because I know that feeling that, you know, where you start in that place. And I tend to say one thing at a time.
yeah,
So same principle. And it has worked for me, because when you're feeling completely zapped of energy, completely low, it's easier to do one thing than it is to do lots of things.
mhm,
And in the beginning, for me, that one thing started out as journaling,
yeah,
at the end of every day, expressing how I was feeling. Now, that sort of journaling is very different from what I discovered in your journal. And
yeah,
the reason why I found your journal was because at the time, I kind of went through a similar journey to you in terms of trying to find some sort of structure for myself and my life. And I wanted a journal that had different areas to help me with all the different things I was trying to do.
yeah.
And I found yours, which is quite exciting. So I'm holding up the journal now for those of you who are watching the video. For those of you who are listening, Klaus, could you walk us through one of the pages and tell us a little bit more about structured journaling and what that means for somebody who's never actually experienced structured journaling like you have?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I would firstly say that all any kind of journaling, any kind of writing stuff down is very powerful, and I think everybody should be doing it. And well, should be doing it. I think everyone would benefit from it, no matter who you are, no matter what you're going through. Even if things are going particularly amazing for you, write that stuff down. That's great.
Totally
So
agree.
the difference I think between the structured journal and the freeform journaling, and a lot of the time, I do the structured journaling, but a lot of the time I find that actually I just want to get stuff out of my system. So I would just free form journaling as well. So the structured journal, the focus is really, and it's based on a lot of sort of principles from CBT, from counseling, and the idea is that it's about mindset, and that your mindset, there's a tendency to focus, there's a tendency for us as human beings to look out for danger, which goes back to, it's a survival instinct. We're looking at the danger in order so that the race can survive. But I think when you're looking at sort of mindset, it's very important to focus on the positive, on the things that are going well, and so therefore the journal sort of encompasses so many things. But the journal is really sort of a central point for all of these different habits to be collated. So on a typical journal, structured journal page, for example, there'll be an element of gratitude, so that you're journaling, but you're focusing on the things that are going well for you in your life right now, which creates a very powerful emotion and creates a sort of a calmness, and it's a de-stressing situation. So there's gratitude in there. There's contribution, because I think if you're sort of the kind of person who journals, you're perhaps a thoughtful person. There's a lot of things going on in your head. There's a focus on yourself. So with contribution, it's an opportunity for you to get out of yourself and think about how you can help others. And by doing that, it's almost a selfish exercise in itself, because you're helping other people, but it makes you feel good. So it's a confusing one there, but contribution is really key. I think when you're looking at personal development, there's an element about how you're going to sort of help yourself today. Personal development, so that's any kind of learning, anything where you're sort of taking yourself out and you're learning something new, which is you're going to add to your brain to keep you interested, to keep you excited, that kind of thing. There's an element of nutrition. Are you looking at whole foods? Are you trying to avoid sugar wherever possible and processed foods? Because all of that stuff affects your mood. There's an element of exercise within that as well. So for example, if you're doing some exercise, and again, it doesn't have to be running a marathon, it can literally be walking around the block or doing a couple of squats or something like that. The element of the daily pages within the journal are focused on just getting you to check in on all those different plates that we're all spinning all the time, and making sure that each one of them is supporting you as much as it can. So there's an element of that. On every daily page, there's an inspirational quote. I find those, I know some people have a problem with the inspirational quotes, but for me, the power of words is so important, which then brings me on to affirmation as well. So if you're able to use words to sort of help reprogram or rewire any sort of negative thoughts that you're having, affirmations are the key. So there's an element of all of those things. I also encourage people to meditate on a daily basis. But again, it doesn't have to be a huge amount. Whatever you can manage, really. If you can't do it twice a day, just do it once a day. If you can't do 20 minutes, do 10 minutes. The idea is taking those small steps, but those tiny small steps do make a difference. And I think, both you and I can attest to the fact that it does work. And so the difference between structured journaling, I would say, to sum up, is it's about keeping you focused on the things that support you and keeping your mindset keeping you in a positive frame of mind.
Absolutely. And, I have to say, using the journal, I think what really helped me was the section on today will be great because
Right, yeah.
that was a new one for me, because I start the day with gratitude every day and I end the day with gratitude every day. Um, and the habit goals are a really nice reminder, because often I forget about one thing or another. I won't
Yeah.
go into specifics. um, But the whole idea about today will be great because it suddenly
Okay.
gets your mind thinking in a different way.
Yeah.
And that was new, and that was incredibly helpful.
And that's
And
something that if I can just interject, that's something that I use with my daughter, and I have for well over a year, you know, because that's something that isn't, the language within that is something that anyone can really understand, and it's such an open question. And so for a 7-year-old, you know, why, you know, so Ava, what's going to be good today? What are you looking forward to do? That the idea of setting that up, of expectation, of excitement about what might happen, I think is so powerful, no matter who you are or how old you are. It's really good.
absolutely, it just gets me thinking about my days differently. That's for sure.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
So yes, the journal in itself has been really, really helpful. And I know you have a Facebook group as well, which I'd like to mention, because it was someone in my Facebook group that recommended the journal because I was talking about journaling, and
Right.
that's how I found your journal. And as a member of your Facebook group, it's just full of such lovely positivity. It's brilliant, absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant.
No, it's lovely. And we've created this space where, you know, again, I step back and I post just a couple of times a week, but really it's about the contribution from everyone there. And again, when you sort of set up a Facebook group, the idea is, you know, you're very clear about what it is about, what it's about. So there's no real room for any sort of negativity or criticism. And it's really, the idea is it's supposed to be a safe place where people can share inspiring stories, or either things that have happened to them or things that they found on the internet, or, you know, quotes or pictures, or even, and again, well, one of the original reasons for starting up the Facebook group was the fact that, you know, once you start on your journaling journey, and obviously you don't need to share what you're writing about, but there will be obstacles that come up. You're not sure about, you know, how do I keep writing this, or what do I find to be inspired by this, or what's my, for my personal development, has anyone got any ideas about, you know, what they do, or has anyone read any great books? And it's an incredible place where, like I said, it's so supportive and it's so inspiring. And so just dipping into that, and it's basically, if you just look for the Way of the Tortoise within your groups, if you're on Facebook, then you'll find it. And then you can just sort of, there's a couple of questions to answer as you come in, but then pretty much we accept everyone, as long as, you know, as long as it's a real person as opposed to a robot. Not that we're anti-robots, but if there were some robots who are into gratitude journaling, I'd have them like a shot. But yeah, it's a lovely place, and thanks for mentioning that. I think more than anything, it's a lovely surprise, because the idea was the journal. Excuse me. The idea really was the journal, and this was very much a support to the journal. But it's created its own sort of lovely corner of the internet, which is
It is
fantastic.
nice. It's absolutely lovely. I like dipping in there. Every day I do, actually.
Oh,
And the other thing I wanted to mention is I wanted to read something from your book. So your book is, you know, What the Tortoise Taught Us.
that's my new book.
And
Yes.
I just received it this morning. So I haven't read it yet, but I've dipped in. And this just really caught my attention. So if you're all right with that, I shall read it out.
Lovely.
Everything that happens to you, yes, everything, is an opportunity to learn and grow. So don't hide from life. Try things and don't have regrets. No one is keeping score. There is no one size fits all answer to living a happy life. We're all different, and that's what makes us all the same. The reason I wanted to read that bit out is with the listeners that we have for this podcast, they've been through some really pretty tough times.
Yeah.
Loving someone with an addiction is it's very destructive, and it can pull you apart into pieces. And this healing journey and what we're sharing here is all about, you know, finding your way back to yourself, and not just getting back to you, but I always talk about getting back to a better you.
Mhm.
And that's why this jumps out to me, is that because everything that happens, you have an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And losing my husband to alcoholism, it's pretty awful, but it's actually made me a better person.
Right.
And I think just that way of thinking is wonderful. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the book and finding what else is in there,
Oh,
because
that's lovely. And definitely a section which almost leads on from that. Do you know the Japanese concept of Kansugi,
yes.
which is a very similar thing? And there's an element in there that talks about that, the idea that we are all broken, but it's those broken bits we should highlight, because that's what makes us who we are. And actually, and potentially, I think, for anyone who's listening who doesn't understand the concept, it's like when bone china is very fragile, but when it broke, instead of throwing it away, it would be put back together with sort of a wax material, or essentially sort of a sealant, but it would have platinum or gold in it. So actually, the parts which are keeping it all together, which, because it's broken, are essentially potentially more valuable than the cup itself. So the fact that it's broken, it is now of more intrinsic value. And I just think if we apply that as sort of a philosophy to us, we are more powerful and we are more capable. Obviously, there is the point where the cup is broken on the floor and we are broken on the floor. But knowing that we can put ourselves back together, and those joins are potentially stronger and more valuable than the cup was originally, I think is a really powerful
It is
message.
powerful. And it was something that you mentioned to me when we first met, Kansugi, and I looked it up.
Oh, that's
And
right. Yeah.
yes, and what I'm actually looking at doing is creating a kit for anyone in the Blossom community, that they will receive their kit. And as they grow stronger, piece by piece, creating something new from all of the broken bits.
I love it.
That is the plan. And it's something that I've been doing. It's just nice to see something that visually represents healing, is how I look at it. So it's quite
Absolutely.
beautiful. It's
Oh,
quite
that's a great
beautiful.
idea. Oh, I look forward to seeing it.
Yes. So many ideas. And it's one of those things that the journey might be hard,
Mhm.
but it's also beautiful at the same time. And it all comes down to how you look at it.
Absolutely. And this is sort of brings us back to the mindset. And then, do you know the story of Sisyphus? You know, the
I
old story.
don't know.
Okay, it's in the book as well.
Okay.
But the idea is that he was this is sort of, I think it's an old Greek myth. And the idea is that Sisyphus was an evil, evil man, and he was an evil king. And so therefore, when he died, when he passed to the other side, his punishment was to every day push a boulder from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. And he would then, at the end of the day, have to watch it roll back down again. And that was for eternity. That was his life. And I think that obviously there are lots of meanings that you can draw from that. But for me, the idea is, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in God. But for me, the idea is that we're here, and we have an opportunity to do some good while we are here, and to find the joy in things. And like Sisyphus, who life is hard. Every day he struggles, and he has to put that boulder from the bottom to the top, and then watch it fall back down again, and knowing that he's got to do exactly the same thing tomorrow. But he has to find joy in that, because otherwise, what's the point? I'm here anyway. I've got to do this work. And so therefore, I'm going to find a reason to be excited by it. I mean, obviously, there's lots of things which have been taken. If you watch Groundhog Day, for example, which is an incredible movie, there's an element of the sort of Sisyphus, concept within there, and it's been talked about a lot. Obviously, and what it means, and how we can draw from that and give ourselves strength. But that's something essentially, it sounds like a sort of a disastrous thing to say, but essentially, the world is meaningless. The world is about the connections that we make, and about the things that we put in it, and about the good that we can do. It isn't inherent. There isn't inherently any meaning. We're all just trying to understand what it's about, why we're here, why this happens, why that happens. And so therefore, you can either look at that and look at that and say, okay, well, there is no point, and so therefore I give up. Or you can say, well, okay, well, I'm here, I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to live the best life I can and help as many people as I can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I write in my journal, I use a heading for each entry.
Okay.
And that sort of ties the pieces together for whatever happened that day, however I felt that day, the learning on that day, And I can flip through, one day to the next over all of the years that I've been journaling.
Yeah.
And you can see the patterns, the ebbs and the flows, and also the growth and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
change in the patterns, the change in the emotions. And that's from doing that one simple thing every day
Yeah.
of journaling, which in the beginning kind of felt like that boulder. Just
Yes.
repeating,
Yeah.
and not really understanding what I was doing. But then I started to grow through it. So journaling has been a wonderful thing.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I think once you've done it, it's very hard to obviously we wane sometimes, and sometimes we don't do it. But I think once you've done it and you felt the benefits of it, then it's very hard to forget about it. A little bit like meditation or anything that really sort of feeds your soul. But I would say it's interesting though, what you're saying about it's very hard at the beginning. And one thing I would say about journaling, obviously I get messages sometimes on a daily basis where people are asking questions about journaling and asking for advice. And we have a newsletter and we have the Facebook group, and there's lots of information we put out there. But people struggle because because once, I think when you start anything new, you expect there to be quick results. I think, even though we understand the concept of nature, that long things, things that happen over long periods of time actually are long lasting. But there's a tendency for people to kind of want a quick hit and go, well, journaling, everyone's saying it's amazing and I'm really not getting it. And I think we have to remember you're the tortoise and you're on your own journey, and you can't compare yourself with other people or what other people do or how they get, how journaling is for them. But I would say that you have to keep going, and you have to push past that pain point, because I think there's a tendency when it gets very difficult, then to give up. And that's where it's really working. That's where you're really stretching yourself and you're really doing the work for your brain and for your body and for your soul and everything. So when it gets difficult and the chips are down, that's when you need to push through, like you said, and keep going. It's a little bit, I think Tony Robbins used to talk about the idea that when you're building muscle, if you're a bodybuilder, you can do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 press ups. But then when you get to the 61st, 62nd, 63rd, and it's really hard, that's when you're building muscle. It's not, you've built up the muscle already. So if you really want to push yourself and really get the benefits, you have to do that a little bit more. Not many, just like one step, one press up, whatever it might be. So pushing past the pain point is a key practice that I would say anyone who's journaling. And if you haven't really got the benefits of it, it may be because you haven't really pushed yourself through it. You're kind of going, well, this is a bit repetitive. I'm doing the same thing every day. I don't really understand what, That's when you have to then be creative with your thoughts and think, okay, how does this apply to me? What do I want out of life? What do I want out of my day? How do I want to react to people? How do I want to help people? How do I want to be good to myself? Those are the questions which should come up when you're journaling. And it's difficult, but
it is
the
difficult.
benefits are there.
The point that I'm at right now with my journaling, this will be the last thing I raise on my journaling, is being true to yourself, being true to your story, being honest, brutally honest with yourself.
And you're saying what in your journaling you don't necessarily do that?
I think we have a tendency sometimes to apply filters and not necessarily, if I'm talking about how I'm honestly feeling or something that has happened, for me, at some points, it was trying to write something that felt a bit perfect or nice to read.
Yes.
And then getting past that and being honest about what I was actually feeling, what actually happened.
Yeah.
Being brutally honest, because you're not always happy with yourself and something that you did or how you behaved or how you thought.
Yeah.
And if you can be honest with that, and it's just with yourself in your own journal, no one else is going to read it.
Yeah.
So if you can be honest there, that's where I think greater growth can come from, because that's part of the healing process. I heard on a podcast this morning, a Brené Brown podcast, and it was like the example was a wound, having an open wound and picking it out bit by bit and cleansing it. So each time you tell a story or each, part of the truth of your story, it heals that wound bit by bit.
but only by focusing on those, on the parts that are painful.
Well,
Is that the point?
that's yeah.
Yeah.
I'll look up that podcast and I'll do a
Okay.
little story about it. But they said it much better than I did, obviously. But it's that whole idea of that if you just ignore a wound, it won't necessarily heal quickly.
Of course, yeah. Well, and also, and it's really interesting. I love the idea of taking something physical and applying, like Kansugi, or like the idea of a wound. A wound stays infected if there's stuff in there that shouldn't be there. It stays
Yes.
infected. It doesn't heal. Yeah, that's very powerful. But it also, do you know what? You brought up something really interesting. Is that I think there's a tendency when we're writing stuff. If you write stuff on Instagram, Facebook, there's a version of your life which we all try to project out there. And I think it's important to remember that when you're journaling, it isn't that. It isn't that at all. And you have to push past those pain points and get that horrible stuff, perhaps if it's happening to you, out there onto the page, because otherwise it stays within you. And you need to, like the Brené Brown thing, you need to get that stuff out. And then there will be a point where you know, there's a little bit more positive. The other thing you mentioned about trying to get things right, I think I've mentioned to you this before. I've had people who have bought the journal, which is a great step. That's step one. But then it will stay within its wrapping for months, sometimes a year. People are going, well, and when I'm ready, I'm going to do this when I have some time. And I just want to scream and say, no, now, do it now. And even I have some people kind of posting on some of our, so the posts that I put and people putting on the page or the Facebook page, kind of saying, you know, I really wasn't sure about whether, you know, what to write in my journal. And I'm thinking, this is what you should be writing in your journal. You can, obviously you can share it with us, but just write this. It doesn't matter what it is, you know, just write, even if the questions don't apply, and you're saying, do you know what, I don't feel grateful. I don't think, if you really are struggling, just go, I'm really not feeling grateful. And then the powerful question, why? Just write those 3 letters down. Why? Question mark. Why am I not feeling great? And this is to go back to sort of Socratic questioning, where you can deep dive into the same thing simply by adding the question why. I don't feel like journaling today. Ask yourself why? Question mark. Because things just haven't really been going well for me. Why? The depth that you can get with that journaling is incredibly powerful. So that's a good tip, I would say, for anyone. It's not necessarily something you need when you're sort of doing your bullet journal, but if you get stuck, that's a great way to kind of get yourself out of it, or at least understand what's going on with you. Yeah, I think, and I think at the very beginning, you talked about the idea of uncovering what's there. And I think my journal is called A Journal to Happiness, but essentially that it's a little bit distracting, I guess, because the happiness that we all need is within us. The idea that you're going somewhere else to find it is almost a sort of falsehood. I think it's in there. We need to uncover it. We need to be like archaeologists, trying to understand what it is that makes us tick, what our values are, what made us happy, what makes us smile. And if we can uncover those things, then we have a real knowledge about ourselves, and then we can take the next step forward. And then there's a powerful metaphor, the idea if you were dropped into a city and they gave you a map and they said, okay, we want to get you to get to that point. The map is useless if you don't know where you are on the map. And I think journaling helps you understand where you are on the map. Then you take the next step forward. And then you can go, right, I'm here and I want to get there. So therefore, I take that step and I find the direction I want to go in.
That is such a powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
I love the sound of that. Yeah, it really does help you find where you are.
Yeah, it does. And it helps you uncover the things that you perhaps, I think deep down we know, but they get the layers and layers and layers of responsibility and family and relationships and career and work and a to-do list, all those kind of things. They sort of layer on top and you sort of really forget who it is that you are. So journaling is a way of really uncovering that. And also a very powerful self-expression tool. You know, you can write prose or poetry or thoughts or ideas or even a shopping list. You know, just get it all out there and put it all on your journal. And I think we talked before about the fact that looking back on a structured journal is a very different situation than looking back on a journal, for example, might be freeform. And I have a journal which I don't like to look at because I kept it at a very difficult time for me. And it was before I was structured journaling. And there's some really horrible stuff in there, and I can look at it and look at my mindset and see how I was thinking, and I was very negative, and it's quite painful for me, and it brings up very negative times. And I'm looking forward to a time when I can sort of sacrificially set it on fire, and obviously in a safe environment, and just watch all of those things go up in smoke, because I think that's a very powerful thing to do. I haven't done it yet. But the difference between that and my structured journals, where I can look back, and the structured journal is designed to help you stay positive and keep a positive mindset, and look at the things that you're grateful for and the things that you have. And I think you can just flick through those and they instantly give you a lift. Just looking at just the gratitude sections, why you're grateful. And my daughter Ava is always in there. So, and it just reminds me how lucky I am. So structured journaling is very powerful on that aspect. It's something that you can always go back to and just flick through and give yourself that powerful lift.
My freeform journal is the same. I have the same feelings about it. It's quite powerful. I do look back. I like looking back because it helps me to see how far I've come. It's been a really difficult journey, and I can now see that I'm healing. Whereas in the beginning, it was just painful.
Yeah.
But I can now go back to the very first entry and read it. And it took me many, many years before I could flip backwards and look back at those entries.
And the fact that you can now shows, the fact that you can even physically open those books shows that you've actually come on a huge journey.
Yeah, it's nice for my current self to think about the future self and look back at the past self, and how life has changed, and how I've grown and definitely blossomed. Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a danger in us getting caught up in the past. I think it's there. We can't change it. We can't do anything about it right now. But it's there for us to learn from. And so I don't think we can't pretend that it hasn't happened. It's there, and it's taken us on the journey that we're on now. And so therefore we have to be grateful even for that. And I think that's a powerful thing. If you can be the power of gratitude, if you can be grateful for even the worst things that have happened to you, or the situations that you've been in, or things that have happened to other people that you know, for example, if you can find a positive in that, then you really are sort of flexing that gratitude muscle. Because imagine how you can feel when things are going great.
Definitely. And as you're on the topic of gratitude, I always end every call with gratitude. And what's something that you're most grateful for right now, Klaus?
Well, my default is always my daughter Ava. So, but she's not a thing. So I'm going to say this call. This has been a lovely conversation. I'm really grateful that we got in touch and we were able to talk about this. And I'm grateful that we've got the opportunity to help other people who might be going through things. And even if one thing that we've said here today has just given someone just the minimal amount of hope, then I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that one thing, definitely for anyone listening, the one thing to take away from today's call is the concept of journaling, is to pick up a pen, put it to paper, and it can just be a simple piece of paper. It doesn't have to be the perfect book, the perfect journal. Just get started and write down how you're feeling, and let that be the beginning of your journaling journey.
Fantastic.
So thank you for joining me today, Klaus. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure perhaps we can talk again at some point in the future, maybe with more specific questions about journaling, as people begin to take up that as a really lovely positive habit in their lives.
I'd love to. Anytime.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.